Hey guys, this is Larry, and today I'm going to be talking about the security clearance process. So in this video, I want to talk about the entire security clearance process for a secret security clearance, top secret security clearance, all the steps that is involved in that process, my tips and advice for passing a security clearance, and then at the end of the video, I'll tell you about a time where I did not pass one, I failed one. And I've done the clearance process 6 times throughout my career in the military, private security, and trying to get jobs after the military. So I've been through the security clearance process many times, and so that's why I wanted to make a video sharing my experiences, and so that to give you some information that might be able to help you if you have to go through the process. So whenever a security clearance, you can't just do it on your own. To get started, you have to have gotten an offer from a company or government agency, and they have to put you in or sponsor you for clearance. So my first time getting one was in the Army. When you initially join the military, you have to fill out a security clearance packet, which is called a SF86, and that is a security clearance packet. That packet is like 60 or 70 pages of information about your whole entire life, and you have to fill it out and give every piece of information dating back all the way to when you were 18 years old, and some of it is all the way to the beginning since childhood. And so that's what I'm going to be going over in this video, is each step that they ask for, and like how far in detail you should go. So you have to get hired by a company, and they have to, or a government agency, and they have to put you in for a security clearance, and then you'll get that invite to fill out a SF86. And it used to be all, it used to be paper, and you would fill out a paper packet, and now it's all digital. They'll give you like a link to a website, and you'll go there and fill it all out. So there's 3 different types of security clearance. There's secret security clearance, which has to be renewed, reinvestigated every 10 years. There's a top secret security clearance, which has to be renewed every 5 years. And there's a top secret with SCI, or sensitive. It's like above a top secret, and that has to be renewed every 5 years also. And then sometimes they have a polygraph with a secret, usually unlikely a top secret, and then a top secret with SCI always. And so I'm pretty sure top secret, most of the time, you're going to have a polygraph also. So that means you're going to go through the whole entire process. You're going to fill out the packet. Someone's going to do an investigation on you. And then towards the end of it, then you're going to have to take a polygraph about all the information that you put down to see if you were telling the truth about it. And usually each process also has an interview before the polygraph. So each time I did a secret security clearance, I had an interview. After I submitted all my information, an investigator would come and sit down with you in your local city, wherever you're at, and sit down and have an interview with you. And so the interview doesn't always happen, but it happened with me every time I filled one out. If you have like a more extensive background, or you have some areas that might be a problem, then you're most likely going to have an interview. But sometimes regular secret security clearance won't always have an interview with an investigator. So once you get an offer, and before you start filling out the paperwork, you want to gather all your information together. Your passport, driver's license, social security number, your entire employment history, all the residences that you've lived at, every place you've lived since birth. You want to get all this stuff ready. Do that research before you even start this process, because it's better to have it all on hand. You're also going to need references. You're going to need 3 references that are not immediate family, siblings, people that are related to you, because in the packet they're going to ask for your immediate relatives. And then there's going to be another point where they're asked for 3 references, people that have known you for a long time that aren't related to you. So you want to think of 3 good friends, and they're probably going to have a good word about you, that have your back, and you want to have their addresses and phone numbers. It's going to ask for your education. So you want to look up every school you've been to, every college, university, every extracurricular class you've been to. Look up that information for the school, the years you were enrolled, addresses, phone numbers. You're also going to need all your relatives' citizenship information. So if you have any relatives that are citizens of another country or not of this country, or they have a different naturalization status, and make sure you get all that information also. So you're gonna get, like I said, you're gonna get a link to like a website, and you're gonna open it up, and you're gonna have to start filling this thing out. And one of the first things is gonna, like, general questions, your name, passport information, your citizenship. That's gonna go through your residences. You're gonna, with no break in where you've lived, you have to go back 10 years or until your 18th birthday of every single place you've lived. And like for me, when I was younger, my dad was in the military, moved around a lot. So I had a lot of addresses, a lot of places I lived in the military. I moved around a lot. So you're going to have to put down every place you've ever lived with no gaps in between. Like if you're even homeless, for a month or two, you're going to have to write down homeless during this time. And then your school, every school you've been to, middle school, high school, elementary, college, and any extra schooling that you've done, they're going to need all that information. And because they're going to investigate and look at your academic records to see if you ever had any disciplinary action, if you ever had any, failed classes. You're going to have to do employment info last 10 years, and can be no gaps in that also. So, I mean, if you worked at a job for a month, you're going to have to put that down, because they have ways of looking through your tax information. They're trying to find things that you are not telling them. That's basically the whole point, is they want every single thing in your life, last 10 years, residences, employment, and they're trying to find that thing that you didn't tell them. So make sure you put every single little thing, every school you went to, employment, even if it was only for like a month or so, put that down. There's no point not putting it. You might as well put it, and then instead of it seems like you're trying to hide something. So like I said before, the 3 references, it can't be your spouse, it can't be a relative, or anybody else listed on the form, because there's a section for relatives, and they're going to need to know every single relative you have and their information. So your brother, sister, mom, dad, stepmom, stepdad, foster parents, guardians, in-laws, and if you have any half-brothers or stepbrothers, stepsisters, half-sisters, every single address and phone number of those people. And then 3 references outside of that. So some good friends you've had since school, work buddies, you're going to need 3 solid references. Marital information, you're going to need all your spouse's information, your spouse's social security number, and, obviously she's living with you, her address. Any foreign contacts, that's another big area, the foreign contacts. So if you know people that live in other countries, maybe you're not citizens of America, they're going to ask about that. What kind of foreign contacts have you ever had? Have you ever worked for foreign governments? Have you ever been approached by, a foreign government to do any type of work for them? And that's kind of a big deal, because they want to know if you're a liability towards another country. Your foreign connections, are you going to be a liability? And then there's going to be an area about your psychological and emotional health. They're going to ask if you've ever been declared mentally incompetent. Have you ever been ordered to seek mental health treatment? Have you ever been, submitted or tried to go to a mental institution, either for, anything that has to do with, substance abuse or psychological health, any of that kind of stuff they're going to want to know about. And again, make sure you're upfront and honest, because they're going to find out. They have investigators that are going through all your stuff, and they're going to be looking everywhere in your history, in your past, and they're going to be looking for those gaps, looking for those things you didn't tell them. And they're going to have people investigating your city, running your name through your city, all the other cities you lived, and they're trying to find those things that you omitted. The illegal drugs section, they're going to know what type of illegal drugs you've used, how long you use those drugs, and how much. So let me tell you about this section. So, I had, of course, experimented in high school. I think all of us did with marijuana or whatever. And it's better to be honest and say, yes, I've tried that once or twice, and I realized it was stupid, and, I moved on, I grew up. Someone that's going to deny that and say, nope, never encountered it, never touched it, never. And I'm like, really? So you've never had anybody bring it up to you? You've never had somebody ask you? and you're like, nope, I'm all good, then that looks more strange to them than if you were to just admit, yeah, I did once or twice and I realized it was stupid and moved on. So uh, with that being said, with like hard drugs, like, you know, like heroin, meth, ecstasy, that's a little different. If you've had like extensive use of that kind of stuff, you're probably just going to be disqualified off the bat. Like I'm telling you right now, if you were a heroin addict, you're probably not going to get a security clearance. There's certain things, like, they understand people make mistakes. If you have driving mistakes, if you have drug use or financial stuff, I mean, people make mistakes and they understand that. They're pretty lenient. But if you show like a repeated behavior that you're continuing to make those same mistakes, and you're probably just not going to get the clearance. You're not going to get approved in the end. So just know that. Be honest. But starting out, if you have an extensive drug history, then probably not going to get the clearance. So that's a section. Then another section is going to be financial debt. How much total debt do you have, and are you doing anything about it? So everybody has debt. They have school debt, medical debt, whatever. It's not a big deal. Credit card debt. But are you doing anything about it? Do you have a payment plan set up? Are you working with the creditors? Did you already pay them off? So when I went through mine, I had debt, you know, with my first daughter. We didn't have insurance when we had her. And so we had a massive medical bill for my first daughter. Also had some credit cards that like I just didn't pay on. And so when it came time to security clearance process, they were like, well, are you making payments? Are you doing anything about it? So I actually set those up at that time. Like I made a big chunk of payment and said, well, now I have this contract with them. I'm paying them this and this. And they were okay with that. I got the clearance that time. But if you're not doing anything about it, it's not going to look good for you. You probably won't get the clearance if you have debt and you're not doing anything about it. But if you're, so that's what I'm telling you. Like now, if you're about to start and you have debt, at least get a payment plan. Hey, I'm paying them $20 a week. And even that looks like you're trying to take care of it. So at least set something up and to look like you're trying to take care of it. Any type of debt. So that's pretty much it. Then you're going to validate, sign it. Always save a copy when you get to the end of the SF86. It's also called the EQIP, EQIP. Stands for electronic questionnaire, something like that. But when you get to the end, it's going to say save and then submit. So make sure you always save a copy for yourself, because there's going to be corrections. So when you submit it to the agency, usually you're going to have like a security person for that company or the agency, and they're going to look over it and see if you need to make any corrections, like, hey, you missed something here. Hey, the address here wasn't correct. Hey, you know, almost every time I did it, it was always sent back to me, and they would be like, hey, make this correction here. You need to add something here, fill in here, what happened here, provide an explanation here. So it's probably going to come back and forth a few times. And then once you submit it and you have no more corrections, then you're going to just be waiting on a security clearance process. And this process can take a long time. I had one that took, no lie, 2 years. 2 years from the day I submitted it to the day I was approved. It took 2 years for that whole process to go through. And that's pretty unusual. There was some different circumstances with me. You know, I had a lot of addresses. Military, I was in a lot of different duty stations in a lot of different places that they had to try and track down. And, you know, there was a lot of different circumstances with mine, but just expect it to be a long process. I mean, on the fast end, maybe 3 months, 90 days is fast. 6 months, I would say, is typical within 6 months. And within a year, I would say at the higher end. Me, you know, mine was kind of unusual on the longer end. So a couple tips, and then I'll get to my story at the end of how I failed. But tips, try and be overly detailed with names and addresses. Put everything you know, the apartment number, the street exact name, the full name, you know, you want to be as detailed as possible. The more you give, the better off you'll be. The less you give, you're gonna have kickbacks to fix. They're gonna find problems. The interview you have, when you have an interview, they're gonna try and find all the mistakes you made or anything that you didn't omit. And that's pretty much what the interview is. It's like, hey, why didn't you put this down? Hey, why didn't you tell us about this? You know, why didn't you tell us about this charge you got in the city where it said you got a jaywalking ticket? Why didn't you tell us about that? And then you're like, oh, I forgot, or I didn't, did you really forget, or are you trying to hide something to make yourself not look as bad? Or they're gonna be like, hey, we found this credit card that you didn't pay from 2 years ago. How come you didn't put that on your application? And you say, oh, I totally forgot about that. Or are you trying to not tell them so that you don't get in trouble? So I'm telling you, be as honest as you can. You are more likely to get approved if you tell them all the stuff you have, good or bad, than if you try to hide some stuff so that to make yourself look better, because that's what's going to fail you, is when you're trying to hide stuff. Also, when you go to the interview, don't hide anything, but also don't offer what is not asked. So if they don't ask you about, a specific thing, then don't answer it. Like, don't give more information than you need to. Like, so yes, be honest, answer every single question, be 100% thorough, but don't offer what's not asked of you. Like, oh, one time I did get in a fight in high school, but the teachers didn't see us. Or, oh, one time I did, run a red light, but I never got a ticket for it. Like, they're not asking you that. So, don't tell them what's not being asked. And then, I already said this, but just be patient. The process takes a long time. When I was doing it, I remember there was like forums online. How long, when did you submit? When did you have your interview? And people just obsess over what's going on. How long is this going to take? And my best advice would just be, forget about it. Just go about your life. You should not be, any job that requires security clearance is like usually an amazing opportunity, whether it's military. Usually military ones go pretty quick because it's just a basic security clearance. But like a government agency, FBI, DEA, Border Patrol, government contracting, these are really good prestige jobs. So you should probably have something lined up as a fallback. Like, hey, I'm going to be working as a security guard while I'm applying for the FBI. Or, hey, I'm going to be police officer while I'm waiting for my DEA security clearance to go through. So work on your job. Or, hey, I'm going to work at this factory while I'm trying to get on a contracting gig. So just keep living your life and try not to think too much about, why is my clearance taking so long? When is the next step going to be? Just keep living your life. And hey, if it goes through, then you get this amazing opportunity, and if anything, it'll hit you by surprise. That's kind of what it did to me. I'd almost like forgotten about it when it finally came through. I'm like, wow, because you can like obsess over it every single day, checking your email, checking the status, and it's just going to drive you crazy. So I'll tell you about my experiences now, and then when I failed one. So when I went into the military, you have to get a standard security clearance. You fill out all your information, your packet, and you got a basic clearance. So, if you have extensive driving record or criminal charges, you're probably gonna get in the military. If you have an extensive financial debt, you're probably not gonna, they're not gonna get you in, because you have to have a basic security clearance. And then while I was in, after some time, they put us in for like I think it was a secret or top secret. I don't remember what level it was, but they asked for a bunch more information. Hey, if we need more information, fill out this packet, more extensive about your background. They put us in for another clearance. So then when I got out of the military, I tried to do Border Patrol. So Border Patrol, I filled out, theirs is a top secret clearance. And so I filled out the background investigation process, the packet, the SF86, and I did the physical test, passed that, went to the written test, passed that. Then I even went to an oral board in another city. I had to drive to another state, like through the night after work, passed that, passed the oral board. And then the last thing to do was the polygraph. And so this is the polygraph that I failed. It was for the Border Patrol. So they get me there, and I go to this office, and they tie me all up, and they have the thing on my chest. You're sitting on something. They got stuff on your arm, and they're like, what is your name? Larry. Yes. Are you, and they ask you all these baseline questions. Well, then they start getting into these questions that, that I didn't end up passing. And so I think what had happened was, I think I kind of psyched myself out. I think when I was sitting there, I was like trying to think of my breathing so much that I think I was almost like holding my breath at times. Like, I'm like, and then there was times where like he would ask me a question and I would like way overthink it. Like, did you ever, what was one they asked me? They said, did you ever use a computer at work for something that wasn't related to work? And so at first I was like, no. And then then right away in my mind, I was like, well, this one time I was working at a hotel and I worked at the front desk, and you could check people in and out. Well, when there was nobody there, you could like go on the internet and browse the internet. That's what everybody did. You were allowed to do that. But that's what was on my mind. So I'm like, have you ever used your work computer for anything other than work? And I'm like, no, but technically I've like surfed the internet, and but I didn't say that. So then he's like, all right, next question. He was like, have you ever lied to an authority figure or something? And I was like, no. And then I was like, but I think I've like lied to my dad before or something, and so I just kept overthinking things. So then they get to the end of it, and it's like, what are you hiding? What are you not telling us? And I'm like, what do you mean? And I was honest about everything. I was like, well, I don't know. Some of your numbers are jumping. So they're like, we'll let you do it again. We'll take a little break, we'll come back. And he's like, here's the areas you stood out. When you asked about a computer or something, like, you were like, so what's going on? And I was like, well, I mean, I think I used a computer for something other than work one time. He's like, okay, that's not a big deal. All right. So then he asked again, did you use a computer for, and I'm like trying to think, I'm like, was there any other jobs where I searched, And so I don't know. I guess my advice is just to not overthink things. Like, just be honest. Like, maybe I should have said yes. Like, yes, I have used it for other things. I mean, maybe that's what I should have done, but I kind of just psyched myself out. I was way overthinking. I was thinking about my breathing. I was thinking about everything that applies to that question. And so anyway, I didn't pass, and I didn't get the job because they said you did not pass the polygraph. So that was for the Border Patrol. I didn't pass it. And then a couple of years later, I had finished my schooling. I got my degree, and then I applied for the FBI. And when I was applying for the FBI, I went down for the interview down there, and was part of the security clearance process at the beginning, and they asked about my debt. And that was when I said, I mentioned earlier I had some debt from when I had my first daughter, and at that time, I didn't have any payment plan set up. I was like, yep, I have this debt. And they're like, well, what do you plan to do about it? I'm like, well, when I start to make more money, I'll take care of it. And they're like, well, why aren't you doing anything about it now? I'm like, well, because I don't make very much money right now. So they're like, yeah, we're just going to tell you right now, you're probably not going to get on because you can't have that kind of debt. You could be a liability. Someone could bribe you, and you could take a bribe because you owe money. So this is a suggestion. If you're going for stuff, make sure that you have all your debt cleared up. So then I started looking at security contracting, and I got offered a job to go over to another country and do air asset controller, and that required a DoD security clearance. So I applied for the DoD security clearance process, went through the process, and then after the 2 years after I finally got it, guess what? They didn't even have the contract anymore. And contracting, like, they have gigs for like a year or more. It wasn't even a deal anymore. So they were like, all right, well, you can apply for another job within our company and see what happens. So I look at, and this company didn't have any security stuff. They had nothing else that was in my field. And so while I kept looking, I found out about WIPS, or World Protective Services. And so I applied for that. So they're like, all right, here's an offer. We want you, but that requires a Department of State clearance. So now I had a Department of Defense clearance, and they wanted a Department of State clearance. So I started the process all over again for the Department of State. Fill out another SF86, fill out the whole packet, go through the whole thing. I had an interview with a Department of State guy, and then I was waiting for that to come back. And then my buddy told me about another gig that was Department of Defense, and that was the thing I ended up doing. And they were like, well, you have to have a Department of Defense clearance. So I'm like, all right, this is better than the Department of State one. Let me do this. Well, guess what? Now it had been too much time since my other security clearance was granted. And so they had to redo the process all over again. And so luckily they had a lot of my information from before, so it didn't take as long as it should have. And so eventually that went through. I had to interview with the investigator. I didn't have the most perfect background. I had debt. I had some driving stuff. I'd been in an accident before. I had a couple driving speeding tickets, but I still got the clearance. And it took a long time, but eventually, they had to know everything about me, all the financial debt, all the mistakes I made. Once all that was out there, had the interview, then I got the clearance and I got that job. And so I ended up doing contracting for a little bit. And then, COVID happened and the contract stopped happening as frequently. And now I'm at where I'm at now. I'm not doing any of that kind of stuff. But all right, that's the end of the video. Just wanted to share about the security clearance process. Maybe it'll help some of you if you plan to go through the process, or if you're just curious about how it all works. So thank you guys for watching. And